The Blind Burro, Baja coastal cuisine and spirits featuring unique twists on traditional Mexican fare. San Diego County Credit Union. It's not big bank banking, it's better. Bob Jensen Air Conditioning and Heating. We are here to make you more comfortable. Promises 2 kids, creating a bright future for foster children. Now live from the Blind Burro, it's the Darren Smith Show.
All righty, hour number 2, San Diego Sports 760. As always, you can find us on the free iHeartRadio app with you till 3 o'clock. We are live from the Blind Burro, what is scheduled to be our final time here for the 2023 Major League Baseball season. And we say it that way because we know some of you out there are holding out hope that this thing somehow, some way, over the next 9, with some results happening in other cities, that the season might be extended. We'll talk about that, I think, coming up on Monday. Dennis Lynn of The Athletic, kind enough to stop by to the Blind Burro this afternoon. One of the previous times that he was here, crashed into a carafe of water. So we appreciate you making your way back, Dennis, as always. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Darren. Yeah, I'm looking at this big glass of water that Marty has strategically put very close to the edge of this table. So it's like she's trying to set me up. But we have, well, I guess the next 20 minutes for me to avoid disaster. So I'm going to try to do that.
We'll see. We have faith in you, Dennis. Dennis, you made you raised a lot of eyebrows this week. You and Ken Rosenthal collaborated at theathletic.com. The headline, The Padres' Disastrous Season Reveals Shaky Foundation and Institutional Failure. As the Padres play out the string in one of the most disappointing campaigns in Major League history. A club that spectacularly collapsed 2 years ago must again confront the shakiness of its foundation. Are you getting nervous at all about the premise of your piece here, given that, like, this team has won 7 straight and other teams around them ahead of them in the wild card standing seem to be collapsing?
No, not really, to be honest. Maybe some people are of the mind, and I've seen this thrown around, and I don't think Ken and I would take credit for this, that articles like this bring a team together. I wouldn't presume to assume that, but yeah, it's been interesting, kind of starting to watch the scoreboard a little bit more, but also recognizing that even if they win out, it's like, I think I saw on Fangraphs today, like a 33% chance if they win out of actually making the playoffs. So if you're asking me if I'm nervous that they're going to make the playoffs, I think it'd be a great story. I hope they do, but not counting on it.
Okay, good. So sometimes you wonder about that, right? Like you say something and it's a declaration, it's definitive, and then you're like, well, okay, like did I leave a little too much time here? And I'm with you. Like even if they are perfect here down the stretch, and they've given you no real reason to believe that they could do that, like just the aspirational sports fan probably is of that mindset. But it is sports, so there's that ever so slight chance. I don't know, what's this worth to you that the CEO of the team, Bob Melvin, alluded to the piece in The Athletic that you contributed to? I don't know what it's like to push publish on a piece like this, but when you have people in powerful positions not disagreeing with it, I'm sure it says something to you as one of the co-authors.
Yeah, there's a lot of time and energy spent in this piece, multiple months of work, and obviously multiple months of observation this entire season. Not only this entire season, but past seasons, 2022, 21. I'm sure everyone knows that 22, that the run they went on at the end kind of masked some things, and 21, obviously everyone knows what happened then. So I have seen again that some people think our piece that we wrote after the 21 season, and that's on The Athletic as well, kind of just scrutiny on the GM and the manager at the time, Jace Tingler, who was fired shortly afterward. It's kind of a similar piece to what we just put out this past week, but I think those points are worth raising again, even if there's some overlap. But I also think we try to shed some new light on what's maybe gone on beneath the surface, and honestly, maybe even if they had made the playoffs, let's say lost in the first round, I know there's still time for that to happen. We might have written this piece anyway. So not surprised by any of the reactions so far, and I think our work stands for itself.
Dennis Lynn of The Athletic joining us. So you brought it up. I was going to ask you because I've heard people on the station. I've heard others, whether they've been commenting or on the text line or interacting on social media, feel like there's some deja vu here from a piece that you wrote back in 2021. Did you have deja vu when you were writing it? Did you feel like I feel like I'm writing the same thing? Like my analysis feels very much similar to what it was in 2021 when you had a rather in-depth piece about what was going on in this organization.
A little bit, and I think you do have to juxtapose at the same time the situations. Again, in 21, they collapsed at the end. Here, it's kind of been just this long slog of mediocrity. So I don't know what's more alarming to you, that the fact that they haven't been over 500 since May, and the fact that they were I think 18 games over 500 in August in 21, and then they just kind of died at the end there. But I think either way, when you take both of them together, it does warrant an investigation of kind of what is the culture of the team. And a lot of the people we talked to kind of alluded to the fact that there's just a culture of hard work in this organization under AJ Preller. That's been known for a long time, but kind of the lack of trust that a lot of people feel in a lot of ways, that trickles down to the clubhouse. And I think you can't totally discount that. You also can't say this is the reason why they didn't win this season, but at the end of the day, the GM's been here for 9 years, and there's potential he's going to get another manager. That raises all kinds of questions. So what is going on beneath the surface that is causing this so-called, I guess, instability that seems to persist, whether they have a winning season like 2022 or not?
Dennis, you wrote in as much depth as I think any of us have seen about the relationship between AJ Preller and Bob Melvin. And for those that missed it or you're not a subscriber, Dennis and Ken Rosenthal write, what will happen with manager Bob Melvin, whose relationship with Preller, one player, and I presume it was a current player, described this, quote, unfixable. You know, it's one thing for us to talk about, hey, I heard this, and sometimes there's a little bit of venting there. But when you have players who are in that clubhouse and they are talking about how this is unfixable, how does a relationship erode so badly that the players inside of the clubhouse consider this to be unfixable?
Yeah, it does. Again, it does trickle into the clubhouse, that kind of thing. And I mean, Bob Melvin's in that clubhouse all the time. Obviously, AJ Preller maybe not as much, but that is something players have noticed. And AJ Preller is around the field quite a bit when he's around ball clubs. So there are conversations that we've been told that players have had where Bob Melvin will tell them one thing, AJ Preller will tell them another, and that goes back to the lack of trust. So I think another player said, who can you trust here, because you're being told two different things and you don't really know what exactly the real story is. So that kind of just goes to, I guess, management style under AJ Preller. Not saying it's good or bad, but a lot of people after this point, after 9 years, would say there's a lot of communication that needs to be cleaned up. Maybe some lack of feel going on there from the front office, because they're very much in the clubhouse, it sounds like, even though I think Bob Melvin has kind of wanted them to be less involved in the clubhouse ever since he got in there, as opposed to Jace Tingler, who maybe didn't have as much of a say, being a first-time manager.
Right.
That has changed some, but there still seems to be a lot of involvement from the front office, and players do seem to feel that in the end, because they're human just like us. They have eyes and ears, and they're the ones who have to go to work every day in this environment. So it does seem to affect them.
So when a player, though, and let me ask you to just pick your mic up a little bit. When a player is saying that something is unfixable, are we saying like the whole structure here is unfixable, or there's a dynamic at play between Bob Melvin and AJ Preller that's unfixable?
Yeah, and I don't know when a player says that. And that was a current player, by the way, that they're thinking about the entire structure of the organization. I think they're just looking. They're trying to win every day, right? They're trying to go to work and trying to do their job. So a lot of these players do have, I guess, tunnel vision, so to speak. But for a player to notice that and have that tunnel vision, as most players do, that tells you that's something that's maybe distracting them just a little bit, at least. And that's probably not the healthy thing to have when you're trying to deal with all these expectations of making the World Series and dealing with all these heightened expectations of the payroll. So I think, unfixable between the two of them, that is a word or a kind of an illusion that a lot of people have made. And whether that means the entire organization is unfixable, I don't think that's what it means. But those are kind of the two leaders of the baseball operations department, at least the most visible people. So when that's the case, that's not good. And this is the third manager in a row where it's kind of deteriorated, especially toward the end, the manager and the GM relationship. And this includes Jace Tingler, who was very close with AJ, and I'm pretty sure things did not end well based on our reporting.
So was it okay last year? Last year was an 89-win year. It was a trip to the postseason, to the NLCS. And you always heard maybe there's a little bit of a yin and a yang here, that, they balance each other out. Even Preller talks about that and sort of spins it as, you're never always going to agree on everything and blah, blah, blah. Did this dynamic exist last year and it wasn't as important because the team won 89 times, and this year it's maybe more prominent? Like if you were to have asked a player last year about this relationship between Bob Melvin and AJ Preller, would they have said, oh yeah, not good?
I think the losing this year definitely exacerbated and brought it more to the surface. But if you were around last year, there was some tension there, and not saying tension's a bad thing. Like, you don't have to like your boss, or you don't have to like the person right under you. And to succeed, and they were having a lot of success early, and then they had success late. And I know there was a long stretch there in the season where they were kind of playing 500 baseball, and things were getting kind of tense underneath the surface. But I think you have to ask yourself as a reporter, as a journalist, like, again, people don't have to like each other to win together,
Sure.
and they were winning together. So I think things have gotten worse as things have deteriorated in the standings. So a lot of kind of a common criticism of AJ Preller and his kind of regime is that when things kind of don't go well, maybe he grips the steering wheel even tighter, and he's already gripping it pretty tight. So does that make things better? Does that make things worse? It's hard to say, definitively, but definitely a conflict of styles that has been known about not only this year, but first year too.
So when players, as your reporting suggests, are being told two totally different things, one from the manager, one from the general manager, is there an example on that? Like baseball's so unique, it's hard to put any of us in our professions into this position, right? Like we got a program director and you have a group manager and all sorts of stuff. But like a manager and a general manager, like what would be an example of something where they're hearing two different things, one from Bob Melvin and one from AJ Preller? Like, how involved is AJ Preller in what goes on inside of a clubhouse?
I'll just say to preface this, it's not a conventional structure here in San Diego. A lot of people say they can go directly to AJ if they want to say something. Employees, not just players. And when he's around, and some people have said he's not been around quite as much, this year around the team, physically, the major league team, because he's been off scouting or he's been doing his usual thing where he kind of disappears for long stretches of time. But he still is maybe more accessible to the common employee and including to the player than most GMs are. So, for instance, I don't want to be too specific here, but like a player wondering about their role, if their role is about to change, if something's changing with the roster, and for example, again, maybe they go to AJ Preller and they ask him, what's going on, and then they go to Bob Melvin and they ask him what's going on. If there's two different stories there. And part of that, too, might be a lack of communication between the GM and the manager. I know AJ told Marty the other day that they talk 5 times a day and they have a tight relationship, but that is not what we heard.
It's not what I've heard.
No.
I heard there was like significant time where they didn't talk.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on the road, even in Oakland, I saw AJ Preller in Bob Melvin's office after games, probably doing a post-game debrief. Who knows what else they were talking about. But he was with the team, so that's kind of what you do when you're on the road, especially after a game. But that's not what any of our reporting over the last year plus indicated about AJ and Bob Melvin. Not to put Marty on the spot.
No, it's okay. I should have asked, who does the talking? When you guys talk 5 times a day, how many questions? How much does Bob get in? How much is you talking?
It's a very good question, Marty. No, but I thought you asked some very good questions to him the other day, and how he answers it is obviously up to him. But obviously, they're trying to. At least AJ is trying to present more of a unified front at this point, and I think it's a little too late to keep up that illusion. And when two people aren't communicating, I think it leads to mixed messaging that players, do feel, and that's not a healthy thing. Even if you have to, I guess, put the bulk of the blame on the players for not producing the season.
What number's higher, the Padres playoff odds or the odds of AJ Preller being fired?
Wow. I mean, if you say their playoff odds are what, 0.6% or 0.7% according to Fangraphs, I'd say, just personally guessing, I think AJ getting let go is higher than 0.7% at this point. I know that might be going out on a limb, even for some people, with how much Peter Seidler loves him. But
well, that's an interesting, this is an interesting time because, I don't like doing this, just like I didn't like doing last week, asking you to comment on something that appears in the Union Tribune, not the Coyote story. But, I know that the CEO, Eric Grupner, went on the flagship station today, and I'm guessing that you probably heard that or will listen to it or saw some recaps of it. And, he had some interesting things to say, and I wonder where we are at this particular point in time. I don't mean to sound, crass about it or flippant about it because you understand Peter Seidler's, he's got a medical history. Hopefully he's just had a wart removed or something. But, who's running things right now? Who's in charge right now? Is that a question worth asking?
Yeah, I think it is. I'm sure you've brought it up on the radio in recent days, but first of all, I think everyone hopes Peter Seidler, with what he's done for the city and what he's done for this organization, is definitely on the path to recovering and doing better. And we'll see him soon enough. But that is a question that comes up when your owner releases a statement that he's not going to be around, probably not going to hear from him, I would assume, anytime soon. And, in 21, he didn't want to comment for the story Ken and I wrote back then, but he commented that the day that Jace Tingler was fired, he commented in a lot of depth. And those are questions that are not going to be answered this time. And I guess Eric Ripper has kind of stepped up in the void to at least do an interview today on the flagship radio station. So it is a question that should be asked. And if Peter Seidler is AJ's biggest backer and he's kind of not involved right now, what does that mean for AJ? But I think there is some uncertainty and maybe some anxiety in the baseball operations department right now for some of the reasons that we're talking about right now.
Should be pointed out again, I'm paraphrasing, I didn't hear it, I don't know if you did, but Eric Rupner seemed to suggest that whether it was your piece and Ken Rosenthal's piece at The Athletic or Kevin Acey in the Union Tribune, he seemed to suggest everything was fair. He didn't suggest anything was inaccurate. So, just for whatever that's worth. He also said some pretty pointed things, I guess, paraphrasing again about roster construction. Dennis, I don't know if you heard that or not, but it's not every day that a CEO comes out and talks about a top-heavy roster when he's talking about roster construction, is it?
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't hear that exact part of the interview, but I heard about it being, I guess I heard the paraphrased version, but that is interesting that he would come out and say that. And I think I heard the part where he said at the end, or near the end, that, sometimes winning masks some things or kind of gives you some false positives. And I thought that was eyebrow raising as well. The fact that, the CEO would say that about, just less than a year after they went to the NLCS. But, in the case of our reporting, again, that's something personally I have to agree with, that, some things were masked by the winning last year. And those are things that we heard about at the time, but they were winning again. So it's hard to know exactly how big of an issue it is. But I think when you have two seasons like this in the span of 3 years, it is worth kind of bringing to the surface.
Speaking of ownership, and again, what we don't know is tough to comment on, but you and Ken wrote a little bit about ownership. You wrote, the questions persist. Rumors are continuous. Padres are short on cash. Seidler is selling off pieces of the club. The team's limited partners are resisting more capital calls. This was written at The Athletic. Those are quotes. Can we expand on that at all? You said there, or you or Ken or whomever it was for that paragraph writing about the future, says that these are rumors up until this point. How loud are these rumors about Padres being short on cash, selling off pieces of the club? Limited partners are resisting capital calls. That sounds pretty serious.
First of all, very loud. We've been hearing it right since last offseason when they started going crazy with all these extensions, and people were wondering how they were going to do this. And it got to the point where even Rob Manfred addressed it on the record and said, the question is, how sustainable is this in a smaller market? I think at a media day at spring training. So that was a little bit unusual, but yeah, I think you would expect 29 other owners to be a little, maybe not Steve Cohen, to be a little chafed about the way that Peter Seidler was going about business in the offseason. But I think the question now, especially with Peter Seidler kind of sidelined, it seems like, and I've heard, people from MLB have been trying to get in touch with him and they haven't been able to, probably because of his health situation. But I think there is a big question, like how do you plan to fix this, so to say, because they don't have a TV deal going into next year. They're being backstopped 80% by the league this year, but next year, who knows? Like, all bets are off. Like, how are they going to make up that money, the TV revenue? And that's, more than $50 million that they'll be losing out on. But also, the fact that, this season has not resulted in the kind of, postseason boon, at least not yet, that they're kind of expecting. So, a lot of people would say they're still losing money right now, even though they're kind of maxing out all their revenue streams. So what does that mean for the future? What does this mean for some of these contracts that seem to be aging very poorly at the very start? But there are a lot of people talking not only around the league, but I think in the league office about, like, what is the next step here? What is this plan?
That's a lot. There's a lot happening here. How much would winning, as improbable as it is, how much would that help this whole situation here over the next 7-8 days, if somehow, some way, this team, through a miracle of planets aligning every place, how much would that help?
Yeah, I think it would help some, but I think if that had been more of a legitimate, we've sustained this through most of the season, we're going to the playoffs, I think that would have given a lot more confidence to. It sounds like some of the limited partners that we refer to in the article, minority owners, and I think there's a question of, like, how much buy-in does Peter have even under, his own roof from the other owners in his organization? Are they totally on board with what he's doing? And there have always been rumors that he's bought out people who aren't quite on board over the years and increased his own stake in the team. But I think there were people in the organization who thought they should have sold at the deadline, even though it was a really tough decision, to say, okay, we're only 3 or 4 games back of the wild card spot. We're going to sell Who knows what could happen? But there were definitely people in the organization who were pushing for them to sell. And now, in hindsight, with the benefit of hindsight, they've been proven right. So those people who I can't imagine are very happy right now. But again, it comes down to Peter Seidler because he does own the majority stake in the team. I'm not saying he owns more than 50%, but he and his family and his partners own, the biggest stake in the team. So what are they thinking right now? It's hard to say because, again, he's sidelined and, hopefully he recovers the time and, is ready for the 24 season. But until then, I think there's a lot of questions that are unanswered.
One baseball question. You are a postseason or MLB Awards voter, correct?
I've actually sworn off that duty.
Oh, you did?
Forward. It's not a New York Times mandate or anything. I just
last year you voted.
Last year I did vote, and I think it'll probably be my last year going forward.
No way. How come?
I kind of thought about this over the years.
I wouldn't want it. I don't know that I would want it either.
I don't like the responsibility of determining like clauses and contracts a lot of players have these days for award finishes when I only watch the Padres most of the year. And I see other teams that come in, and maybe it balances out in the end because the people in their markets are going to kind of vote maybe a little more biased toward those people. But I think the idea of kind of being partially, even a tiny sense, responsible for whether someone gets like an extra $1 million or something like that.
You don't want to make Blake Snell rich?
I think he'll be rich no matter what. He'll be fine. But, personally, as kind of like an untrained watcher of baseball, I've watched a lot of baseball over the years, but something about deciding, awards, especially deciding what people get paid in a lot of ways, especially as those clauses and contracts have kind of become more common, kind of makes me feel uncomfortable. So I've decided that's not really, my cup of tea, I guess.
Good for you. I mean, that's somebody who said I've got some morals and I'm gonna follow through with it. We didn't even bring up Don Tricker. Thank you, though, for bringing Don Tricker up so that everybody could Google Don Tricker and then get irrationally angry about whoever that person is.
Yeah, I was not expecting John Boy to put out an entire video on Don Tricker, and I saw John Boy do like a deep dive on Google. And those are things I had looked up as well, not just before the story, but in the past. But yeah, I mean, I guess we kind of put him on blast in the end, unintentionally, but it was a way to illustrate, and his influence, from what I understand, has diminished over the years. And he came in with some good ideas, according to some people, like he wanted to get more family time for employees, and that's a good thing. And one person put it this way, that, he's probably better at relating to people, especially employees, than AJ Preller is. So that was part of the reason why he was brought in. But in the end, it seems like same person said actually that, he gave into just the way that AJ wanted to do things because that's his boss and AJ's making most of the calls in the end. So you kind of got this employee who's very high paid. I think might be the third highest paid person in the organization.
Really?
Off the field, other than Bob Melvin and AJ Preller, who's kind of, people don't really know his job, but he's still in that inner circle of AJ Preller. So the lack of trust that kind of fosters, and this might be, again, AJ Preller not explaining his job well enough to people around him, that kind of rubs a lot of people the wrong way, including players. So that is definitely one thing that players have noticed and talked about.
Dennis, incredible reporting. Again, when essentially one of the highest ranked people in the organization is like, yeah, fair, fair, not wrong. Not unfair, not wrong is what the CEO said this morning. Then, it tells you an awful lot about some of the reporting and work that you guys did on this with Ken Rosenthal. We appreciate you. It's raining again. Good luck with your long walk back to Petco Park. Thankfully, you have an umbrella.
Yeah, two of you don't, so.
We do not.
Sorry.
We're going to sit here until it stops raining.
Thanks, Darren.
We appreciate you. Dennis Litt, everybody from The Athletic. We are back after this.